I tell you what, this camera is a line in the sand. Any gang stalkers that come along knocking, trying to cross that line, I will record them and expose them to the world. So those gang stalkers better watch themselves.
I really hate going out amongst the crowds. It's hard work. I don't mean having to keep my wits about me in case any gang stalkers are in the vicinity. No. When your instincts have been sharpened and your resilience strengthened from year after year and wave after wave of organized gang stalking, keeping track in your own head of who and where the gang stalkers are among the crowds and what each one is up to, that's the easy part. But if I'm going to share these experiences, getting all of that straight in the heads of other people is where the hard work starts. Firstly, the current cast of active agents involved in gang stalking me is fluid. It changes on a regular basis, with old perps bowing out for whatever reason and new perps showing up like clockwork to take over the reins of the hostilities. So that creates one layer of complexity to any long-running TI story. Secondly, there's the total number of people that take part in a gang stalking campaign. While some perps may stick around for a relatively long time, others may play a fleeting role before disappearing, never to be seen again. But the longer you are targeted, the larger the number of perps you encounter over time. This works out in favor of the gang stalkers because the constant flow of new and old perps gradually erodes the target's credibility as the tally of people the target claims are gang stalkers increases. Then there's also the clandestine nature of gang stalking. Most gang stalkers do not openly attack where everyone can see them, although some do. So it can be hard to prove in some situations. The combination of all these factors means a target who tries to tell others what's happening is at risk of looking increasingly paranoid as their situation becomes more complicated by the growing number of perps and gang stalking incidents. The likely outcome is the gang stalkers avoid any serious scrutiny while the target's mental health is called into question. People question the sheer amount of resources that would be needed to encourage that many agents to constantly pick and prod at the target over a long period of time and possibly over a wide geographical area as the target relocates from place to place over the years. As sympathetic and open-minded as some people may try to be, it all gets too confusing and far-fetched to believe. It becomes easier to believe and to try to convince the target that it's all in their head rather than admitting that something is wrong with society. The target ultimately gets written off as delusional. The target, they say, needs psychiatric help. This is why, in order to prove this is not the case with me, I started wearing a camera everywhere I go. The camera never lies, as they say. It simply captures undeniable proof of what happens. I can take things a step further after the fact and break down the video so that people can see what I'm talking about in a way I couldn't show just by talking about it or writing it down. Written journals or verbal accounts don't move the dial much in convincing people that gang stalking actually happens. I know I've tried. Who are you, they ask, that a large group of other people would spend all their time following you everywhere and trying to bother you? But the evidence I've collected from just 6 months of recording has enabled me to shed light on the truth of what I've been saying for years. It's not, and it's never been me that's the problem.
You're a fucking monkey!
You hungry?
You're a black dog. You fucking black dog!
I'm gonna call the police.
Call the police.
screaming for? Tell me. Yeah, I'm gonna ask the police if you don't answer me.
The problem is that there exists a contingent of humans within the general population that seem to have a satanic calling to try and distract others from living peaceful lives or achieving worthwhile goals. I've seen a lot worse than anything I've shown on video so far. Behavior that legitimately makes me wonder if every person I see in the street is entirely human. From what I've seen, I'm not entirely sure. What is certain is that some people seem to enjoy being wicked. Some of them go out and steal, lie, cheat, or kill. Some engage in things like gang stalking. But for what ultimate purpose? Who brought them together? Are they getting paid? If so, who is funding all of these people? Why is it so widespread? How come so many people claim to be targeted like this? Well, here's my opinion. Demons. A consortium of demons working behind the scenes, pulling the strings of the gang-stalking world, feeding on the misery it's designed to generate, positioning wicked people within society like pieces on the chessboard for their own evil purposes. That would certainly explain where something as sinister and uncanny as gang-stalking could come from. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that gang stalking would be solely government orchestrated or solely down to mental illness. In the countries I've lived in, unless you're doing things that get you noticed by a government, I doubt the government would realistically squander large amounts of money and resources targeting one person who does nothing else but keep to himself and mind his own business. I'm not some high-profile activist or extremist out to bring the government down, or someone privy to top-secret information that could harm powerful interests. That kind of thing does happen, but saying you have to be important enough to warrant that kind of attention ignores the reality that the vast majority of people who claim to be targeted individuals are everyday people living ordinary lives. Now, demons, on the other hand, would explain how and why anyone, regardless of their status in the world, can be picked out and constantly hounded wherever and whenever they go. You don't have to be particularly special to be targeted. Demons don't care about your standing in the world. They merely look on those they target as cattle to be farmed for their suffering. Human mental and emotional suffering is food for these entities. Anyway, regardless of its causes, my point is my camera has proven itself very useful in gathering evidence that gang stalking, in my case, is real. There are people out there who will refuse to admit it, and that's their right. But to help make the evidence I present even clearer, instead of referring to perps with wordy but vague descriptions like the especially unpleasant perp I clashed with at the beginning of the year, I'm giving code names to those perps that end up playing a prominent or repeated role in the ongoing harassment. Because I have a feeling that things might get a little more complicated to explain from here. I continue to make progress in achieving the goals I've set for myself, and demons don't like letting go of people whose emotions they have become accustomed to feeding well on for many years. For me, it was extreme, almost uncontrollable anger. I'm sure that other TIs can confirm experiencing this themselves, where the gang stalkers they deal with will increase the severity and frequency of their attacks every time the target reaches a milestone, often on the very day that milestone is reached. Yet I never talk to anyone about the particulars of what I'm doing. So how is it that they have the kind of knowledge that allows them to time their attacks with that level of precision? The answer is they don't, unless you tell them. But the demons do. and they will use other people to try and mess with what you're doing. While they don't know the intimate details of what I'm doing, they know I'm about my business, and it makes them furious. That's the way I've found to turn the tables and get back at them, by getting out there and getting shit done. I remember seeing a TV show, and one of the characters said the best revenge is living well, and it's true. So, I anticipate that there's going to be an increased sense of urgency and desperation about these gang stalkers as they try to trip me up. In fact, it's already begun. You just have to look at some of the videos I recently posted to see this. Anyway, they will fail, because I also have very powerful forces helping me, but that won't stop them from trying. I think the use of code names for all these various agents popping up will make it easier for anyone watching to keep track of things. I mean, they're all unpleasant, or they wouldn't be harassing people. So I'll use code names that are evocative of some aspect of their behavior or appearance to help distinguish one agent from another. Speaking of the aforementioned perp that I recently clashed with at the beginning of the year, this is he. He's featured in several videos now and has played a starring role in recent gang stalking episodes. So from now on, his code name is Whitebeard, for obvious reasons. But like I said in my last video, Whitebeard has quietened down a lot and hasn't uttered a hostile word for weeks. As you can see, there's been a big change compared to a few weeks ago. But if Whitebeard, or whatever is working through him, should become active again and pick up where he left off in future, you'll know who I'm talking about when I use that name. I don't know that we've seen the last of Whitebeard as an active agent. I get the feeling that without my camera always on me, he wouldn't be so quiet. My previous videos involving Whitebeard clearly show that he's a professional troublemaker. I get the feeling that he's merely biding his time. This contrast in his behavior from a few weeks ago to now has been forced on him. But will it last? We'll see. My camera will be waiting if it doesn't. Okay, I codenamed this replacement agent you're looking at Scout, because he was the first one to follow me into the car park of my current apartment building. As I explained in my last video, with Whitebeard currently out of commission, a reshuffling of the guard is playing out right now in the roster of gang stalkers that I'm currently dealing with. In my last video, I talked about harassment workloads. The total amount of effort brought to bear in harassing a target by all participating harassment agents. I suggested that Whitebeard had been forced to moderate his behavior against me because I showed the video I recorded of our recent clash to the police. The police were therefore able to see for themselves what actually happened, as if they were there when it happened, and not based on some less than accurate eyewitness accounts. Therefore, with Whitebeard inactive, for the time being anyway, I predicted that a tactical team reshuffle would occur, that there would be a redistribution of the existing harassment workload for me to either another single replacement agent, but more likely to a larger group of replacement agents. Unlike Whitebeard, these replacement agents can plausibly deny any wrongdoing, combined with some restraint in their attacks, in other words, picking their moments more carefully, and not allowing themselves to be goaded into resorting to physical violence like Whitebeard did. Multiple replacement agents could effectively work together to keep the attention off themselves and on a target's likely state of mind. The next clip, an older clip from my last video, features two of these replacement agents. I'm going to be talking mainly about the one on the right side, the one with the arrow pointing at him. In the clip playing now, these two perps followed me into the car park of my apartment building one morning. The one on the right greeted me good morning after I stopped to observe them. As I explained in my last video, the one on the left is a known acquaintance of Whitebeard. He's been relatively low-key lately, but then again, so has Whitebeard. So I still consider him to be a very strong candidate as a replacement agent because he was in the park that morning and because of the company he keeps. You know what they say, birds of a feather. That's the perp with the arrow pointing at him, out in broad daylight where you can get a better look at him. I codenamed this one Lurker because I keep finding him creeping around in the building where I live. Here he is in the following clip making a racket in the same car park he followed me into a few weeks ago. I didn't realize he was there at first. I thought it might be the staff using the loading bay for the mini mall next door, but I got enough of him on camera that you can see it's him. I have no idea what he was up to there, but he got on his bike as soon as he heard someone coming. So in light of the recent clashes with Whitebeard and a known connection between Whitebeard and these perps, I wasn't sold on Lurker's friendly morning bro greeting in the car park at all, and once again my instincts have been proven correct. Because in the next clip, after scanning the immediate area inside and outside the room I'm sitting in, I assume to make sure there's no staff nearby, Lurker re-enters the room, stares at me for a few seconds before calling out, "Nigger." Even though the TV is playing in the background, you can still hear what he says. I'll add subtitles to make it even clearer. I'm going through my phone while this happens. I don't look at or speak to him in response because I'm not the least bit surprised. Lurker watches me closely for a few seconds after, obviously looking for an indication that I heard him, but once he realizes I'm not going to answer, he turns away in obvious frustration and enters the staff's office. So from the smokescreen of a sham morning greeting one day to the premeditated and carefully concealed use of racial slurs the next, and I've never said a word to him. Does that make any sense to you? It does to me. The morning greeting was a ruse. It was meant to appease my suspicion when I stopped to watch them as they followed me into the car park. I've seen these kinds of tricks more times than I care to remember. The video I posted about someone who offered me food and then engaged in a racial run after I said no is another good example of this. Part of that video appears earlier in this one. I've left links in the description box. So I've been waiting for Lurker to make that inevitable first move to confirm what I already knew. No matter how polite and friendly these harassment agents initially strive to appear, something always feels off about them. I called it weeks ago, when some people may have called me paranoid for not taking his greeting at face value. Now, in a sane world, encounters with people like Whitebeard and company would not occur so often, and once you managed to get rid of them, things would settle down for a decent amount of time. But look how these new faces started oozing out of the woodwork shortly after Whitebeard went dark. These perps were around when he was on the rampage. Why only exactly after I neutralized Whitebeard's ability to attack did these replacement agents decide to stick their head above the parapet? Why? Because that was the plan all along. To relentlessly press the attack over an extended period of time, one incident after another, constantly nipping away like piranhas to slowly wear me down. When a target starts to despair or self-destructs, demons will swoop in and gorge themselves on the target's suffering. So, that's 4 replacement agents that have emerged since Whitebeard was taken out as a major agitator. Like sleeper cells, they were only activated when it made strategic sense to. Time will tell if any of these replacement agents become as much of a nuisance as Whitebeard tried to be, if any more of them turn up, and whether Whitebeard returns as an active agent. Or maybe, just maybe, I've seen the last of the gang stalkers. Yeah, right.